Hello, well, everybody. In fact, we have even more people here than I originally anticipated, but I am Nathan Marchand, the author and host of such podcasts as the Monster Island Film Vault and Hitchin Power V3, as well as a little show I do on my author channel called But I Digress. And with me are...
Hello, I'm not Nathan Marchand and everything else he said. I am the Omni Viewer, author, general YouTuber, Godzilla fan, and nuisance, depending on who you ask. But I'm also here, but I'm also not the only one, because also is...
Well, I am neither Nathan Marchand and everything he said, nor am I the Omni Viewer, author, YouTuber, and everything else he said, but I am Elijah Thomas.
One Elijah Thomas.
Most famously, I think everybody obviously will know me for seeing Godzilla -1 in theaters 30 times. That is not a joke. 9 times for minus color, 8 times for minus color, 32 times in a plethora of different ways to view the film. Host of the podcast, Kaiju Conversation. I do many things. I think the only other big thing I can really plug here is I am the bonus feature producer for SRS Cinema on their Kaiju and Tokusatsu titles. I've worked on about half a dozen or more titles now. That is what I got.
Yeah, and I will admit this entire thing has been kind of a bit of a last second operation. It originally started because Ryan over here asked me if I had seen a certain video by a certain accented cinema. And I said yes, and it made me angry. And he said, I think I'm going to do a video about it. I was like, you know what? We've already done this once before where we did a shared live stream where we responded to a YouTuber's hot takes on Kaiju. Let's just do it again. He's like, well, what do you want to do? I was like, well, can we do it after Thanksgiving? No, let's strike while the iron is hot. I'm like, okay. So
Black
Friday it is.
That is after Thanksgiving.
Yeah, it is after Thanksgiving. But Black Friday it shall be. And then I started... while I was fighting with StreamYard on my laptop to clear off space so I could get stuff off of StreamYard and have space to include whatever, I started sharing stuff out on the socials. And then Elijah's like, you didn't invite me? Like, okay, do you have time to jump in? Yeah, okay.
I'm flattered that's the voice I have. Like, it's not just like, you didn't invite me. You're like, yeah, my name's Dior. You didn't invite me.
Well, I keep defaulting back to constantly tired Elijah.
Well, that's not changed, but
no. Well, yeah, that hasn't changed. But anyway, so here we are, and the plan is we will actually let Cinema speak for himself. We will watch the video here on the stream. We will pause it on occasion and discuss the points that he is making, because we believe in, letting people speak for themselves around here. We won't do what I wonder he's doing with this movie, which is misrepresenting it slightly. And Ryan, just make sure you let me know when you have those screen grabs that you wanted to share, because you can still do that as a guest on StreamYard.
All right. Where do I drop them again? I'm very tech unsavvy.
I think if you just go down here and you'll see this little plus, it looks like a little plus sign in a square, and it'll say not share screen. You could do share screen, I suppose. If you just bring them up on your computer for images. But while you figure that out, and if we have to, you can just send them to me and I'll download them. I think you did send them to me. So So I'm going to do a share. What was that?
Might be easier that way, but
let me do a share screen here. So this, for anyone who doesn't know, this is Accented Cinema's channel. I was hoping he had a little bit more of a descriptor on, for his bio, But all it says here is Accented Cinema is a YouTube video essay series where they focus on foreign cinema.
Uploads bi-weekly.
Yeah, uploads bi-weekly. Now, I've been a subscriber to Accented Cinema for a while. He mostly focuses on Chinese and Hong Kong films. Occasionally, he talks about American movies if they relate back to something like this, and he sometimes talks about Japanese films. At least out of the videos of his that I have actually seen. Now, what you will notice when we watch his -1 video is he's Chinese, probably learned English as a second language. He still has a bit of an accent. He speaks English very well. So just to give you this is, I think, pertinent background to understand about, who it is that we're talking about here. Anything to add to that, gentlemen?
So I would, Omni, do you want to go first?
You can go. You already started.
So what I would add in is oftentimes Accent Cinema will break down, specifically in the Japanese films. I usually watch his Japanese film stuff because usually it's pretty interesting. He likes to pay attention to detail. He's a very detail-centric individual when it comes to his film diagnoses.
Yeah.
One of the things I also want to say is he oftentimes will highlight individual scenes or individual aspects about a film and try to incorporate that into the greater rest of the video and the rest of the movie itself, and really try to bring home his initial thesis. I really enjoy his video talking about the specific scene in the movie Cairo, or Pulse, from Kiyoshi Kurosawa, 2005, I believe, where he highlights the Red Room sequence. And if you've seen Pulse, you know what I'm talking about. Easily one of the most eerie and scary scenes in all of J-horror. Oddly enough, that was actually pulled from a 1990s television special, Hontoni Ete no Kawaii Hanashi, Scary True Stories. But he talked about like the elements that created that scene and how it's so impactful for him, and how earlier on in the film and later on in the film, how it really complements that specific scene. So he does a really good job, I would say, at looking at the individuality of films or scenes or ideas from various films.
Yeah, I would just wanted to say I've been a subscriber for a long time. I have generally found his analyses to be pretty insightful. Very, despite English being a second language, apparently unlike me, well, just like me, I should say, it's very well thought out, very well spoken. This was just one of those times where the video just didn't work, and it felt a little. I didn't even feel like this really met the sort of standards that he has set for himself as a brand, I would argue.
You guys will find out soon enough if you haven't seen the video just yet. But I have to agree. Normally, when I listen to his videos, I hear some interesting insights, and I do think usually he is very detail oriented. So when I watched this video, I just found myself thinking, how did this happen? How did he get to that conclusion? You'll find out, and we will certainly be doing our part to, I guess, set the record straight. We're not doing this to go after him or claim that he's somehow not as insightful as we've just built him up to be. But, this is just one of those things where the interpretation is so off the mark. And I don't know how it happened, per se, but I feel like it should probably be, we should probably set the record straight, and that's what we're going to do with his video.
Yeah, and just so to put this out here, just, I guess, say that, I do respect this guy. I cited one of his videos as a source in one of my podcast episodes, specifically my episode on Paul Gassari, because he had a very nice, pretty involved video on Paul Gassari. And my favorite parts of it were when he was going through, like, this is, different interpretations you can have of this movie. And I brought all of those up in my episode. So, like I said, this just flabbergasted me a bit. So we'll come down and see. Yeah, let's see. Like, he's got a lot of Hong Kong stuff in here. It seems to be his trending videos right now.
And
we'll come down here. What? Yeah, yeah. This was actually an interesting little video about how to spot basically a bad faith critic. I thought that was interesting. Oh, here you go, Elijah. He did a video on Qui-Gon.
He did.
Yeah. Have you watched that one yet?
I have not. That's one of the ones I still need to watch.
Okay. All right. So just be prepared. I don't have YouTube Premium, so it's probably going to play an ad beforehand.
We'll see.
And I can already tell. Oh, yeah.
Although it's on topic.
It's going to be, you'll get copywritten.
You can skip it, though.
Probably.
This is the third time we're covering a film from director Takashi Yamazaki, who previously directed Stand By Me Doraemon and Lupin the First. Dude's quickly becoming one of my favorite directors.
I hate to posit this early, but he starts off by saying Yamazaki's becoming one of his favorite directors. Remember that for later.
Anyway, this video is sponsored by Squarespace.
We'll skip his sponsorship section.
Yeah, the ad isn't necessary.
Yes, Godzilla -1. Now that the hype has settled, I can finally talk about it with clear eyes. Don't worry, I don't dislike it like I did with Shin.
Oh, really? Just saying.
In fact, -1 is up there as one of my favorites, all thanks to its well-written characters.
Again? Really? Okay, sorry.
Including a vengeful, terrifying Godzilla. And that's what I want to talk about today. My thoughts on the depiction of Godzilla, how it affects the story themes, and share with you my one nitpick.
Nitpick, he says.
Yeah.
I felt like he would. I'm going to be honest with you. I felt like he would, when he was laying this out, I felt like he was kind of setting up false expectations here. Because when you say nitpick, I'm like, okay, it's just going to be a small thing. Like, I have a nitpick with -1, and that nitpick is Koichi is conveniently in, there to save Noriko when Godzilla's attacking. Okay, but that needed to happen for the plot, and everything else was just so good I didn't care. He got lucky and found her. Yay. That's not what he has.
Yes, I still have a need. I know I'm becoming that one asshole in the fandom, but hey, it's the job of a critic. Sit back and enjoy. This is the good and the bad of Godzilla -1.
All right, here we go.
Set at the end of World War II, Godzilla -1 follows Koichi, a kamikaze pilot who ran away from his mission. Instead of sacrificing his life for his country, Koichi flies to an island outpost where he meets Tachibana, head of the mechanics team.
Yes.
Tachibana condemns Koichi's cowardice, hinting at one of the core themes of the movie.
Condemns his cowardice. With the first time I watched this video, that was one of the first things that made my ears pick a little bit. Because I'm like, condemns him for his cowardice?
Yeah, because we actually have screenshots that show what actually is said in this scene.
Yeah.
And it's important to land on this because the nitpick that comes later, it sort of is the wave created by him plunking this little stone into the water.
Yeah.
So,
are you able to share those, or do I need to do it?
It'd probably just be easier if you do it. Otherwise, I'll be fumbling around like an idiot. And I do enough of that on my channel as is.
All right. Well, then I'm gonna need a minute here to download those. But You've been a little quiet, Elijah. You got anything to say so far?
So I actually wanted to bring up a pro and con of the movie based off of this. Because we know for a fact that actually Tachibana supports this. We know that his crew and himself all are anti-war. They do not support the war. They want it to end. They're trying to quietly wait for the last remaining days of the war to be over. That's because in the novelization written by Takashi Yamazaki, he elaborates on this further, establishing that everybody on Odo Island just wants to go home. They do not want to do the war. And we see in a couple scenes in the movie still where people say that they support what Shikishima has done here and not went to war. So establishing the idea of Tachibana being scrutinizing towards Shikishima is a little inaccurate, if you will. We do have him approach.
I've got the screen grabs now. But finish your thought.
We do have him approach him here, and this is going to kind of transition right into it for you, Omni. All he establishes is there's nothing wrong with his plane. And that's why he landed, is he supposedly had an issue.
Yeah,
right here.
Just acts oblivious.
Yeah, over the scene that he says it was condemning, we see that he's just saying we didn't find anything wrong, and Koichi says, "What are you implying?" He walks off after this, but it's read between the lines sort of thing. But then as Koichi sits on the beach right here.
Yeah. This is the scene where that I think just undermines that initial statement, and as you'll see later in the video, is Accented Cinema's argument. Because this tells me, and maybe I don't know, maybe I like to think that this is text and this is not mere interpretation. I am looking at this and saying, and my interpretation is Tachibana maybe at one point supported kamikaze attacks, but now, like the rest of Japan, he is exhausted by this war. He has realized that they have been basically fighting a fool's war for a while, and kamikaze attacks were a stupid idea.
So yeah, and we see it right here. I'm on your side. We need more people like you. It's Tachibana talking. And there's one more, isn't there?
I don't think that's Tachibana. I think that's one of the engineers on the island.
You sure? It looks like, well...
I'm pretty sure.
I always assumed it was him, but...
I did too.
Either way, like, even if this is another engineer, we don't have any scene in which Tachibana specifically condemns Koichi anyway. But regardless of who's saying what... We still have this idea of the next one. I don't know if you have the final picture. He says, why throw your life away when the outcome is inevitable, or words to that effect.
Did you send me that one? I thought I downloaded all of them. No, I have 4, and I've shown 4.
Well, there's a 5th one then.
There's a 5th one. Okay, let me.
But whatever the case, just to be clear, if anybody out there thinks that that these are somehow doctored, please, by all means, grab your own copy or find the movie on streaming, watch it subtitled for yourself. You will see what all of the dialogue actually says. So the sentiment here is that there is nothing in this shot that supports what Accented Cinema claims is being said, which is that that Tachibana specifically and the mechanics in general, I suppose, support the idea of Koichi should have crashed his plane.
Yeah, I don't see a 5th image. So
weird. Well, anyway, the fact remains that the whole thing, this whole sequence does not line up with what Accented Cinema claims, even if. Regardless of if it's the same person.
Yeah, now I just want to compare. Just like, did I get it right? I guess that... I don't know. I was like, is there facial hair different? You know,
I always just assumed it was the same person. They sounded the same. But whatever the case, we're still the most that Tachibana does, assuming let's assume it is a separate person in this shot. The most that Tachibana says is imply that he knows Koichi is lying. He doesn't come right out and say it, but he knows that there's nothing wrong with the plane. He knows that Koichi landed here probably because he didn't want to crash his plane and die. So, but there's nothing in there that specifically says, how dare you not fulfill your duty. Mm-hmm. So...
The more I look at this guy, the more I'm starting to think that I have, as many times as I've seen this movie, I have read this completely wrong.
Maybe it's not. But again, you pair that with what you said about what's in the novelization, even though we shouldn't need the novelization specifically to clarify it, but you put all the pieces together, it's pretty clear what the intention is.
Well, what I think helps us with our argument with the novelization is that Yamazaki wrote that too.
Yeah. Who would know the movie better?
The novelization is just basically the script without the edits made to make the film more brisk, if you will.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Which just tells me I really need to go pick it up. But then again, there have been a few of these recent kaiju movie novelizations where people started talking about them. I was like, I'm not normally one to run out and get novelizations. I'm going to have to start making exceptions, basically. All right. So we have those screen grabs. Let's go back to his video.
And keep all of this in mind for later. It will be important.
Yeah. Because even if we grant that what that's not Tachibana, we just see that scene beforehand where he's like, I know you're lying. Again, Accident Cinema's argument has to be based on a specific interpretation of how Tachibana feels about the whole thing. And I don't think it quite holds water.
Mm-hmm.
There we go.
Roll it.
That night, Godzilla approaches. We are treated to one of the best scenes in Godzilla history.
No argument there.
I was going to say.
Oh, Despite its modest budget, critics agree the film's VFX blew Hollywood away. But few can explain why. It certainly isn't the realism. The effects look great, sure, but realism alone does not make it stand above others. What makes the VFX special, in my opinion, is the narrative intention behind it.
I just want to say this is a very interesting idea that I haven't heard other people talk about. And that point that he makes right there kind of distracted me from what I thought was from what to me was a misrepresentation of Tachibana. Like, oh, narrative intent. You might have something there. Now, I do think he undersells the quality of the effects beyond narrative intent a little bit, but
yeah, let's not forget that people who claim to be experts in telling the difference between practical and CGI couldn't tell that the water was CGI during the boat chase.
Yeah.
So water's hard to do.
As the saying goes, it makes you want to believe.
It makes you want to believe.
See, traditionally, Godzilla acts like a natural disaster. In Desotoria, his rampage through Hong Kong isn't much of a rampage. He brings destruction by walking through it. Everything destroyed is collateral.
Everything destroyed is collateral. Okay, whatever, dude.
Let him say a little more.
He lashes out at everything like a typhoon with no specific targets in mind.
Okay, yeah.
Outside of combat situations, be it facing the military or another kaiju, Godzilla rarely acknowledges his surroundings.
Godzilla rarely acknowledges his surroundings.
Yeah, the original movie, I mean, that's a pretty intentional acknowledgement of surroundings, if you ask me. He's very intentionally destroying stuff in that movie. Same with Godzilla Raids Again. Same with King Kong versus Godzilla. Same with Mothra versus Godzilla. Even before he gets to the fights, And then you have Return of Godzilla. You have GMK. GMK, the movie being shown right here that we paused on, he actually turns around when he hears a woman screaming, specifically so he can blast her with his heat ray. If that's not acknowledgement of his surroundings, then what is?
That just threw me for a whirl. Even as someone who defends things like Shin Godzilla, even I'm like, no, that doesn't work. It's not all of the movies.
Yeah, well, what he's talking about is an invention of the Reiwa period, and it only worked in Shin Godzilla. Most people agree. You're about to say something.
Yeah,
I feel like he highlights Destroya. I think he brought that up earlier.
Yeah, he did.
I think if you look at what he's talking about, he is very clearly trying to paint a picture of a specific type of Godzilla, which Shin Godzilla tackles. I would argue by the mid to late Heisei era, that's what Godzilla is primarily for them. Even, I think to a certain extent, you see it, especially in the Hollywood films, like Collateral. 98 is a great example of that, actually. And I think he, as we continue on here, he's going to talk about the depiction of Godzilla further. And even though he criticizes these films like GMK, if you look at GMK, that is the blueprint for Yamazaki's work here. Which, when we get to that point, I'd like to talk further because I've written about it. How this Godzilla is not just realistic or in the narrative. There's a little bit more to it.
Are you talking about GMK or -1?
-1.
-1. Okay, just wanted to make sure. All right, let's get back to that.
Roll it, Smokey.
But the -1 incarnation is different. Facing an encroaching monster, Tachibana orders Koichi to open fire with his aircraft machine gun.
I love that line.
As the audience, we all know this is an ineffective suicide attack.
How?
Well, here's the thing. Listen to what he said. He said, as the audience, we know this is a suicidal attack. And he's about to say this reinforces the idea that Tachibana represents the government telling the soldier to go throw his life away. He is conflating the audience perspective with the character's perspective. Yes,
yeah, but
we know that going into a plane and shooting Godzilla with the guns on a plane probably isn't going to work. One, because it's way too early in the movie to kill him. And second, because we have 7 decades worth of movies that tell us shooting Godzilla with conventional weaponry on a plane doesn't work, save for one huge exception in 1998. Now, we know that. How do they know it? They are for these guys in the movie, this is all new to them. They don't even have other kaiju movies they can draw from, like in the first episode of Gamera Rebirth, where during the fight they say, "What are those movies the Japanese make over here? Kaiju movies? Let's call them that." This is before all of that. The closest thing they would have had are things like King Kong, where conventional weaponry does work. So as far as these guys know, that is their best option. This is just an animal, big, scary, and unidentifiable, but still an animal. They don't have any reason to think that the guns wouldn't work, especially when it's the most powerful artillery accessible to them.
Well, and the other thing to keep in mind is we still don't know if Koichi would have succeeded. Now, I think that uncertainty is what, the plot hinges on that.
Yeah.
So we can't know if he would have been successful or not.
So,
because that contributes to what's going on here. I do think it's arguable, because this is pre-mutated Godzilla, 20 millimeter gun, like you said, that'll kill anything, that it could have been effective. The problem is that Koichi couldn't do it.
Now,
he was too scared.
Here's where I think we're all admitting one of the biggest aspects that is actually in the scene that is taken out of this video.
Yeah.
In the movie, Tachibana tells Shikishima to go do that. And the reason he tells Shikishima to do it is everybody else is an engineer who is not trained on how to fire a 20 millimeter gun. The only reason Tachibana sends him out on this quoted suicide mission is nobody else can do it but Shikishima. If Shikishima was dead, they wouldn't be using it. There would be no, let's send somebody out to do it. And we see that all of the engineers have rifles and are ready to attack themselves. This is not a single person suicide mission. This is a group effort trying to figure out how to survive this attack with this unknown creature. So, furthering the issues with this establishment of what's going on in the scene, this is also in of itself a group of people trying to prevent this from happening. This is an allusion to what we see later on in the film with private citizens coming together to kill Godzilla. It's the same thing, but with less effective weaponry.
Exactly.
To quote George Lucas, it's like poetry. It rhymes.
Exactly. All right, let's continue on.
It mirrors the kamikaze situation. Tachibana mirrors the mindset of the Japanese military, and Koichi represents the expendable soldiers.
Oh, pause quickly.
In mind for later.
In my version of the stream, one of the comments said the engineer we weren't sure was Tachibana or not is Saito.
Okay.
No, it is a different person. So, but
still, confirmed.
Still, Tachibana specifically doesn't condemn Koichi as implied in this video.
Right.
Sitting inside a cockpit, Koichi hesitates, paralyzed by fear. Then Godzilla looks at him. He perceives this world.
Because he never perceived the world before. We've talked about that earlier.
Is this where you want to talk about that, Elijah? You said you had something to say on that regard? Or do
let's keep going a little bit more.
Okay.
That single glance tells us Godzilla is a thinking creature. We start to wonder, what is he going to do? And the answer is terrifying. He starts killing people, not for collateral damage, but deliberate slaughter. It is the first time we see him with such a strong intention to cause harm. Later, during the Ginza...
First time. I already brought up the GMK version. See, here's a woman screaming at him. He stops, turns around, and tells her to shut up in the most brutal way possible.
Yeah, there's also other ones that you could point to. Now, it's not supposed to be sinister Godzilla. You know, I'm thinking of like Ebra, Horror of the Deep, Godzilla versus the Sea Monster, where he looks right at Dio and is like, "What are you doing?" Now, admittedly, that's a holdover from when it was a King Kong script, but still.
It was, but it's not anymore. It's a Godzilla script, so it has to count. Plus,
it has to count.
I'm seeing one comment on my thread here, the 98 version. I mean, you know, if you count it, we see that Godzilla, yes, he causes a lot of accidental damage, but he also is an observant creature. We can at least say he is very aware of his surroundings, looking around, avoiding when he emerges from the ground and we get our first clear look at him, he looks right at Matthew Broderick, thinks, wasn't that the guy in Ferris Bueller's Day Off? And then goes to munch on a lot of fish.
Yeah.
And learning later when he sees the Central Park set up and he thinks, this looks familiar. Last time I got shot at, I am not doing that again.
Yeah. I would say Godzilla 2014.
Yeah.
He has a moment with Brody. They meet eyes. And it's almost just like, yeah, I'm having a bad day too, you know? Yeah. And then they move on. It's another American example, but still.
Yeah. Is this where you want to talk? Or
yeah, so
and King of the Monsters 2019. He looks right at the humans after they resurrect him.
So I have my own interpretation of Godzilla that draws influences from the original, throughout most of the history of the franchise. And I think this is another great example. Prior to the film's release, I wrote an essay about Takashi Yamazaki, his view on Godzilla, and his deep roots with like GMK. And in GMK, I think GMK is the pinnacle example of what makes Godzilla special. And that is the supernatural element to the character. If you look at Japanese horror, I love Japanese horror. You look at stuff like Yurei, which are vengeful spirits, stuff like Sadako and Kayako from Ring and Ju-on. These characters are not like just demons. They're not villainous thing. Like, they have a tragic background. They have a reason to exist. That reason is why they're here in the first place. Sadako was thrown into a well by her stepfather doctor thing after getting sexually assaulted. Kayako was murdered by her father. Toshio is another example. All these characters, and that's not it. Look at the Ghost of Yotsuya, a wife of the samurai, his name's Lemon, is brutally murdered so that Lemon will go with this other woman. And so when you look at Godzilla in that perspective, what created Godzilla was not the adventurous wonder of like King Kong. It was not this ancient beast that was woken up by the atomic bombings like the Rhedosaurus. Godzilla was created by the folly of man, primarily emphasized on March 1st, 1954. Obviously, you can go back to Hiroshima and Nagasaki, so there's more to that story than just that. But the beginning of Godzilla 54 is a direct callback to the Daigo Fukumaru incident. Look at the rest of history. Godzilla raids again. Godzilla shows up fighting another monster. And it does lose that a little bit, but Godzilla is still like highlighted as this force that the military cannot be, like, it's unstoppable. They call directly back to the original film. The original film, Godzilla's scarring on his body is meant to be a symbol.
Scars.
Yes, it's symbolic. And despite the fact that the franchise continued to go more into comedy, science fiction, action, the horror elements of Godzilla are at the basis of the character. Monsters in of themselves are horror characters. That's why they're monsters. Even if a movie like Son of Godzilla is more comedic, heartwarming, sad, funny, there's still that subtle element of horror. Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein is still a horror movie, despite it being Abbott and Costello.
Yeah, because the monster portions of Abbott and Costello are still played straight. The comedy is only with Abbott and Costello. And going back to Son of Godzilla, it's much lighter, but those Kamacuruses and Kumonga are meant to be scary and taken seriously.
Is it Kamacuruses or Kamakrai?
Kamakrai, I don't know. Gemantis.
But so as like you go further and further on, you see these subtle elements of horror and like a tragic past in a way coming back to the Godzilla franchise. There's elements of that in the Heisei era, and then we get to GMK. Now, the thing that makes GMK stand out is GMK, and it makes sense. Shutsuke Kaneko, before he did GMK, obviously he did the Gamma trilogy, but he did films like Pyrokinesis, also known as Crossfire. He did one of the scary school stories. He did Scary School Story 4, I believe it was. He went on to do God's right hand, Devil's left hand. All of these are horror titles, horror stories. Shutsuke Kaneko can do horror. He's done horror. Look at Death Note. He ended up doing 2 Death Note movies towards the end of the 2000s. And when you watch GMK, and you saw this with Mega Gears as well, the early moments with the Mega Nulon and the Mega Nula are very horror inspired. GMK the first half of that movie without the monsters is framed quite regularly more as a horror movie. By the year 2001, sure, the Ring franchise had gotten its 4 movies out, but J-horror was still somewhat relevant. We hadn't even seen Ju-on the Grudge yet. That would come out in 2002. And when you get to GMK and you see like Godzilla, he has those blank white eyes. He is this heartless like monster. He doesn't have the character, but that doesn't mean that he's like emotionless. He still shows that tragic backstory, especially with the fact that they've given this Godzilla the added depth of being the souls of those who were wronged in World War II. Which isn't just Japanese, it isn't just American, it isn't just Chinese. You could consider kamikaze pilots a part of that. That is a very up to interpretation, like who is in Godzilla, But
it's one of the more interesting parts of that movie.
Kaneko went out of his way to really criticize the Japanese government in that film, especially for like the cover up of the atrocities and the dismissal of what they did in World War II. Something that Takashi Yamazaki look all the way back to Always Sunset on 3rd Street too. That Godzilla had a basis of the GMK design. If you look at just before Godzilla -1 was released, Yamazaki handpicked a handful of Godzilla movies that was very influential to him. He picked the original film. He picked Ghidorah the Three-Headed Monster because that was the first film that came out after he was born. That is his birth movie. You had Shin Godzilla because after Shin Godzilla, Yamazaki didn't want to do Godzilla because he loved that movie so much. And you have GMK. And the reason for GMK is because if you look at -1, the design obviously is influenced by that Godzilla, but even the story elements at the very end, obviously Godzilla's heart, or just a piece of his skin. I don't know if it is his heart, but it's regenerating just like in GMK. And those, look at how Godzilla's portrayed. Godzilla he never really shows much emotion. He goes after people specifically. He is just this force of nature coming to invoke its revenge on the people that did him wrong. And just because the Japanese didn't bomb him doesn't mean the Japanese aren't involved in that. It's all of humanity. That's what makes Godzilla so interesting to many scholars, is Godzilla is not racist. Godzilla is not homophobic. Like, Godzilla is not that.
Yeah.
He is reminding humanity of just how small we are and how we are all to blame. We're all to blame for what has happened. And we need to take that into consideration and grow to be better. If we don't, another Godzilla will come back. That is what Dr. Yamane says in the original film. And so all Yamazaki is doing with -1 is he is following through on what I would consider the most authentic mentality that the Godzilla franchise has, that has hardly been invoked besides Shusuke Kaneko since Ishiro Honda.
Yeah.
That's why you're on this stream.
I like an Omni in your chat. There is somebody who quoted me, "Godzilla's not racist."
Yeah.
Let's put that on a t-shirt. I think that's
Godzilla is not racist. And on the back, he says he destroys everyone equally.
Unless it's the human race. But,
oh, man. All right, let's go back to this video.
Yeah,
because we parked on that bit a lot for a while, and I think that kind of addresses some of the other things he said. But here we go.
The attack, the first thing Godzilla does is target a train. Again, it's not random destruction.
Like, this is the first time he's targeted a train. Okay, Godzilla has a long history of hating trains.
He picks up a bus and he throws it back down.
Exactly. Anyway.
He picks his target. There is effort behind his attack. He acts upon his malevolent intent, making his action personal. That sense of intent gives him a personality, and every move provokes an emotional reaction from us. We keep guessing his motives, and in doing so, we see him as alive.
Like, this has never happened before in another Godzilla movie.
Just keep going.
Yeah.
Think about it. The often cited best CGI always comes from characters.
Sure.
Be it T-1000 from Terminator 2 or Caesar from Planet of the Apes.
The T-1000 wasn't fully CGI, though.
No. There's never a moment where Godzilla just exists. Every time he appears, it's either oh shit or oh f***. We become too caught up with Godzilla's character to scrutinize his appearance.
Really? That's his defense of the special effects. We're too caught up in the character to notice the effects. Okay, dude. I mean, there's something to be said for that, but I think it can only go so far. But that's not the primary reason we're here.
And as we dig deeper into the story, we'll see why giving Godzilla intent is so important.
Okay, let me skip ahead.
Creating a portfolio for
Have you or a loved one wanted to get a Godzilla movie? If the answer is yes, don't wait. Amazon.com right now has a 50% off all Criterion Collection releases, including Godzilla the Showa era in 1954 to 1975 and Godzilla vs. Biollante on 4K. Don't wait. Time is limited. Order yours now, or forever be in debt to not having these must-have collections.
It's better to be in debt having got them, if you can't afford it.
Better to be in debt for Godzilla than to be financially wise without Godzilla. Anyway.
.com/AxonListener and start your website.
Get it over with. Sponsorship is over. All right, Squarespace, cool. Moving on.
Squarespace is a great website, I must say.
It's hip to be Squarespace.
As the sun rises, only Koichi and Tachibana remain. The rest of the mechanics are dead, all because Koichi couldn't pull the trigger. At least that's what Tachibana believes, and deep down, so does Koichi.
Well, that part is correct.
The war ends, and the story truly begins. Koichi returns to the ruins of Tokyo, racked with survivor's guilt.
Funny enough, he doesn't spend a lot of time on the bulk of this movie.
Together with Noriko, whose parents died in the bombings, and Akiko, an orphaned baby, Koichi finds himself a makeshift family. Starting from zero, Koichi gradually rebuilds a life, as Tokyo rebuilds around him.
Right.
Despite the haunting nightmares every night, for a moment, happiness is within reach.
Yes, we know.
But at every corner, Koichi pushes that happiness away.
Yeah.
Haunted by survivor's guilt, Koichi becomes self-destructive.
I'm still with you, dude.
And so, whatever he builds, he destroys.
Whatever he builds, he destroys.
I don't know if that's the right word. I would say he resists. He's resistant to accepting Noriko and Akiko as his family. He's resistant to letting himself move on because of all that trauma. If he were to, I feel like if the word destroy is to work, he would be turning them away. He would be constantly telling them in typical harem anime protagonist fashion, go away, you're bothering me, stop hanging around my house.
Well, there's also the fact that you would think he would also reject, like, these three gentlemen here with them. You would think he would be like, leave me alone, I don't want friends.
Yeah.
You'd be much more intentional about that. Because ultimately, it's not Koichi who, quote unquote, nearly destroys this. It's Godzilla, which is the point. Yeah. Anyway, Elijah.
I think the big thing about Shikishima's whole storyline in the bulk of the film is he doesn't believe. I mean, he carries the scars of war.
Yes.
He is in. I mean, as an example for like how real military men from the Japanese Imperial Army went about post-war, Ishiro Honda had a live bombshell on his desk for decades. The Honda family, I believe, still has it. So these people didn't walk out of the. I mean, these four men specifically, with three of them were involved in World War II, and they are picking up the pieces of weaponry that could still harm humanity a couple years after World War II. This is them not letting go. They still are carrying the scars of war with them. And that's why we see them tell a kid to not want to go to war, to stop, like, essentially blowing up the idea of, like, how good the war was, and really just, like, consider all the bad that came with it. And so Shikishima is probably the biggest example, because he still carries, even though I think in this video they say he lets go of the survivor's guilt, he still carries that. He still has the pictures of all the men who died on Odo Island. That's something that's never brought up in the video, is he's still carrying those on him at all times.
There's an interesting comment here. Sorry, I thought you were done, Elijah. But
no, go ahead.
Yeah, he says, wait, isn't Koichi the deconstruction of shonen anime protagonists anime trilogy fans insisted Haruo was? I think that's pretty insightful.
Yeah. Anyway,
you were saying, Elijah?
So with Shikishima still holding on to that survivor's guilt, even though, yes, he's resisting, I would agree, he's resisting the ideas of a happy life. I think part of it too is, and it comes down to what eventually is the reason why he wants to be involved in Watasumi, is he feels like he is indebted, and the Japanese, and especially in their culture, being indebted to somebody or something to see something through is very important. He is determined. I mean, Godzilla is quite literally, going back to what I said about Godzilla being a horror character, Godzilla is haunting his dreams. Godzilla is his dream paralysis demon in a way.
Yes, sleep paralysis demon.
Yeah.
That's either the worst sleep paralysis demon or the best sleep paralysis demon. I don't know.
So for Shikishima, it's just the fact he can't move on. He can't turn the page, and that's why, until he realizes that he can turn the page, which this is jumping way farther ahead. He Accent Cinema insists that Shikishima should have told Tachibana, I have a daughter, I have a life, I need to survive. That's not something Shikishima even considers until well after.
Yeah. And I think that's it's a choice of wording here, because like you guys were saying, Shikishima is not trying to destroy his happiness, he's resistant to it. And those are two very different things.
Yeah.
It's like varying levels of self-sabotage. I wouldn't even say self-sabotage, he's just resistant.
In the comments on my video, the Sea Monster has some insights into that.
Yeah.
If you can cue him up, or can you?
I can see, yeah.
Yep.
See, he can't bring himself to open up why he has PTSD to Noriko in order to potentially have a life with her, because he let people die on Odo Island who had lives that he's currently living. Exactly. Those men who died on Odo Island had families and happy home lives, things that Koichi feels he doesn't deserve because he let those men down and let them get killed by Godzilla. Exactly.
I think it's also important to note that at this time, the social norm was, and I mean, we see Shikishima try to fill this. is he has to be the indestructible head of the house that provides food, provides money, provides everything for the people who live with him, which, his love interest, Noriko, and his potential daughter-in-law, Akiko. He has to provide for them, and he's worrying about that more so than anything else.
Yeah, and then one more comment from Sea Monster. And so when Godzilla reemerges bigger and worse than ever, Koichi sees that as a consequence of all that.
I would agree.
Yeah. But also, hi Zim. He was gonna do a video on this video essay next week.
Well, go ahead. I mean, we don't.
Yeah, don't let us stop you. Heck, if you want to send us an invitation, if we're available, maybe we'll show up. Anyway,
but Shikishima can't open up. Like, that's the general point I was getting at, is he has to be indestructible. That is what the man in the house has to be.
And when everything hits the fan, he closes off even more. That's the -1. He regresses after Noriko's death.
I've never considered the fact that after he appears that he definitely bears that weight, and he does. We see that throughout especially during the boardroom sequence of introducing Watasumi to everybody. He almost walks out until he knows that it'll be what defeats Godzilla.
Yeah. Yeah. Until he can be guaranteed that it's going to work. Yeah. Yeah.
Meanwhile, Japan is also healing.
That's an interesting observation. You could say that Noriko is Japan trying to move on.
Japan rebuilds Ginza, and Godzilla burns it to the ground.
Right. No lies detected in this section.
This is why the aforementioned character animation is so important. Godzilla's attack mirrors Koichi's psyche, which reflects the social mindset of post-war Japan.
I'm still mulling that statement over because I feel like part of me feels like he's conflating things a little bit. Like Godzilla is his PTSD, and I don't. Maybe for Koichi that's the case. I think I tend to look at Godzilla in this as more like the embodiment of war guilt. Or just maybe not war guilt, the specter of the war itself. Not specifically Koichi's PTSD. He's a vestige of the war that won't go away.
I think Godzilla tackles a handful of things in this film.
Yeah.
I think actually one of my favorite things about relating it back to GMK. In this movie, we have a scene that is taken straight from GMK, specifically the scene that preludes the post-Ginza attack, where Godzilla hits the Capitol building,
right?
FYI, with his atomic blast, and it is not just destroyed or a small explosion. It is a mushroom cloud with black rain, which directly calls back to GMK. Now, here's the thing. Let's reimagine the GMK sequence in your head. Godzilla shows up, he's walking on land. We have that old man in the car looking up saying Godzilla. Godzilla looks around. We hear the charging up sound effect. We see him charging up. And then it cuts to a school classroom. Earth shakes. During that shot, we get a cut to a poster of the Daigo Fukumaru, which in Japan is oftentimes labeled as the third bombing of Japan. And then what do we get immediately after that shot? We get a shot of the teacher looking outside and seeing a mushroom cloud and her simply saying atom bomb. Another bombing of Japan. Godzilla is coming back to land, and when he appears, he creates what in this world would be the fourth atom bomb. In this world, the Daigo Fukumaru has not happened yet. But in the context of in Japan, there is something known as the third atomic bombing of Japan. Look what Godzilla does here. He does exactly what World War II pilots did when they dropped Little Boy and Fat Man. And he hits a very densely populated area that is probably the pride of the country at this rate, the capital. And we get the most symbolic aspect of Godzilla and Godzilla looking up to his creator, the atomic bomb. We see him staring down the mushroom cloud as it raises into the sky. And then we get Shikishima crying uncontrollably, representing, I would say, mankind in the aftermath of that, with the black rain falling on him.
You want to talk about cosmic horror?
Yeah.
I think you might have gotten a few of those scenes mashed together when you were describing GMK, but they're all in there.
Yeah.
And your point still stands.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, that's an example, like, of -1 going back to GMK again. But that's, like, Godzilla, that's one of the things Godzilla does. I think Godzilla does represent that, a layer of the PTSD that Shikishima has. I think Godzilla represents the folly of mankind, of course, with, you know, the fact that he was blasted with atomic radiation at Bikini Atoll in 1946, right? I think it's 46. And then, you know,
Yes, it was 46. Yeah, because
it's 46 to 47.
Yeah, I'm just trying to remember what, because it was an actual real atomic bombing. Atomic test. I can't remember which one it was. Suddenly,
but everyone knows what you're talking about. So,
yeah.
So the idea of Godzilla representing just one thing, I think is trying to simplify something that, in all reality, there's
Operation Crossroads. That's what it was. Yeah.
Yeah. I think there's more to be said about the Godzilla character in this than just one or two things. And I think that's one of the beautiful things about this film is Godzilla is such a metaphorical character that he can be multiple things all at the same time.
Yeah.
Right. But I think my point with pausing to bring this up is that I feel like accented cinema is limiting that interpretation. Anyway, let's get back to the video.
When we look at Godzilla, we are peering into the self-destructive side of Koichi. That also means the Kaiju story and the human story are one of the same. It's why audiences said this is the first Godzilla film where they truly cared about the people.
I am so sick
He's
of
not
hearing...
wrong. He's not wrong. That's what people say.
I know it's what people say. I'm just sick of hearing it. Because I feel like people have either not watched enough Godzilla movies, or they haven't watched the right Godzilla movies, or not watched any Godzilla movies.
They probably listened to a podcast about them instead.
Yeah, they probably did. Clearly not either of ours, because we don't say things like that. Anyway.
When asked why he never married Noriko, Koichi's answer becomes the thesis of the film. And thus,
at least he gets that part right.
The second half of the film follows Japan's fight to overcome Godzilla and to overcome its national trauma.
I'm still with him.
This is a common theme in Japanese media. In Rurouni Kenshin,
I will admit, when he veered into this, I might have been willing to forgive a lot of things, because this man just connected two of my favorite things. Because I love Rurouni Kenshin.
Did
Kenshin
Omni... Where'd Omni go?
We lost Omni? Uh-oh. Sorry, sir. I was I wasn't looking at this screen. I probably should just stay on this screen and not, because I'm just trying to make sure when I hit the space bar, it pauses the video. Anyway,
of my end of the stream.
Are you still there? Are you okay?
I'm here. Wait a minute. Is it still going?
Yeah, it's still going. Okay.
All
anyway,
right.
We're at the point where he's connecting Godzilla to Rurouni Kenshin, and I just paused to say I might have forgiven this video for a lot of things because he connected the two of my favorite things. Anyway, we're moving on.
As a quick aside, real quick, something that's funny. The director of this, Shunichi Saito or Sato, I don't remember. It's either Saito or Sato. Was at one point rumored to be directing a Godzilla movie.
So I would have been excited about that. Yeah.
Rumored, bear in mind. I don't think there was ever any actual confirmation, but that was one of the people who they said might be doing the new Godzilla.
Well, given the connections that are being made here, he might have been an excellent choice. But anyway.
The rest of his life helping people to atone for his endless sins. He too is self-destructive, willing to throw away his life to help.
Speaking as a fan of Rurouni Kenshin, what he's saying here is true. Kenshin would recklessly throw himself into fights, in some way hoping that he would die because of his own personal disgust. And that is something he has to overcome in order to beat one of the big villains in that manga and anime. Because he figures out that because he can't, that he has that issue, he can't actually beat this guy.
Nerd.
Yeah. Thank you. I'm just saying, what he's saying is accurate.
It's only through rediscovering the will to live can Japan rebuild anew.
今度の戦いは死ぬための戦いじゃない。未来を生きるための戦いなんです。
This is where things are going to come unglued.
Remember everything we said about that initial little stone that was dropped at the beginning of him misrepresenting the first scene.
Yeah. Strap it.
Unfortunately, this is where the film fumbles. Shit. Here we go again.
Shut up!
The problem lies in the final showdown, where Koichi proposed a kamikaze attack on Godzilla.
爆弾を満載した戦闘機であいつの口の中に突っ込むんですよ。そうすれば確実に殺せる。
Seemingly moved by Koichi's courage, Tachibana decides to help him.
これを書いたこともアキコと言うんです。
I was going to wait a second, but I'm looking at this and I'm wondering, is he trying to say that Koichi only I guess that is true. He did this just so he could die. But there's the question becomes, we find out later he can eject, but he's also like, this is the only way to do this.
Keep playing it because the fumble that has this entire situation fall apart is here in a couple, I think, of minutes or two, what he says.
Also, Tachibana adds an ejection seat for him. And I was groaning in the theater. Let's start from the beginning. Koichi's survivor's guilt came from failing 2 suicide attacks. Once the actual plane attack, and the second time on the island.
Already addressed those.
The rest of the film is his redemption arc. Koichi finds happiness, overcomes his cowardice, and triumphs against Godzilla. Meanwhile, Tachibana vanishes after Act 1, only to return unchanged, still furious that Koichi didn't die for his country, still blaming him for everyone's death.
Pause.
And he learns Koichi's new plan.
This is where it falls apart. The issue is Tachibana went into hiding. He didn't want to be found. He is still himself trying to heal from the scars of war. The only reason that Tachibana returns is because Shikishima blames him for the death of everybody.
Knowing
it would make him angry, yes.
In his letters, he wrote that to antagonize him, to show up, and then so he could talk to him, because he knew otherwise Tachibana would not return. And with the whole Godzilla thing going on at the same time, I doubt he would even want to be remotely involved in the nearby area of Godzilla. So he's only coming back because of Shikishima playing a trick on him. And that's when he gets to, before Tachibana walks away, ignoring Shikishima, he gets to get his spiel out and get him involved. So that is the inciting incident that derails the rest of the movie for him. Is he is under that understanding that Tachibana is angry at Shikishima still, and he shows up to beat him up for that reason. And that is incorrect. And that is where the rest of this falls apart and becomes an issue. He also does suggest that perhaps the ejection seat in the Shinden was already there. It was not. It's a German ejection seat. So that was put in.
Yeah. There's just a lot of this. It just starts breaking down.
And apparently, his willingness to die is why Tachibana tells him to live.
Did I miss a page?
No, seriously, did I? Because it feels like something's missing. Think about it. The film is overtly against throwing your life away. By that logic, Tachibana, who ordered an ineffective suicide attack, should be the one who needs a redemption arc.
But you're predicating that on the idea still that he was sending Koichi to die on that, when we have firmly established that was, if not outright not the case, highly likely not the case.
I think it's important to look at Tachibana as his redemption arc is the simple fact he did put an ejection seat in the Shinden. Because think about it, he was stationed on Odo Island for years, and he fixed up kamikaze pilots' planes all the time. And this is his one time where he can fix a pilot's plane for them and ensure that they can get out of the issue safely.
Yeah, let's keep going. He does have a little more to...
I understand that. I also would like to point out that the reason why Koichi even wants to do this is because he thinks Noriko is dead.
Yeah.
He was on the verge, after resisting it for most of this movie, he was on the verge of finding happiness. Or at the very least was becoming more open to the idea. That is taken away from him by the thing that has been haunting him for years. That's why he's willing to do this. That is why he's willing to be the kamikaze pilot again. He probably even thinks, I can actually be a kamikaze pilot and do what I could never do in the war, even if I had been a successful quote-unquote successful kamikaze pilot, and that is actually make a difference.
Yeah.
So in Koichi's mind, dying is his redemption arc. In a way, you could say this is just a new thought that popped into my head. You could even say he's trying to do the Dr. Serizawa thing, the heroic suicide.
But in
which is a very Japanese thing to do.
But in this case, as mentioned, he's only gotten there because he's regressed. He was starting to move forward. Godzilla put a stop to that, and not only did Koichi didn't just freeze in place. He went backward and thought, well, now I have nothing to live for anymore. That happiness has the one thing that could have truly made me happy, but pardon me for saying thing in regarding a person, that was snatched away. But there's a little bit more he has to say, and I have a lot to say about what he's about to bring
up. Did you have something before we move forward, Elijah?
I was going to bring up that there's a great example of how this is and he brings this up later on about how Yamazaki is a stagnizing filmmaker, which in of itself, my co-host, Jackson, has went on record multiple times saying that criticizing The Eternal Zero is not getting the movie. But a good film to actually compare this to in the Godzilla franchise is go all the way back to 1955 and look at Godzilla Raids Again. In that movie, at the end, they really give, I forget the character's name. I see him clear as day. It is not is not the one. It's not Hiroshi Koizumi's character. It's his co-star. He flies into a mountain to blow up his plane to begin an avalanche to trap Godzilla. And that is the way that they end up saving the day. And they really make it
Kobayashi.
like this. Kobayashi.
Yeah.
They make it so Kobayashi is such a hero for dying to create this solution or to solve the problem of how do we trap Godzilla now that he's here. Whereas here we are with -1 nearly 70 years later, and they make it very clear that Shikishima should not crash into Godzilla. He should live. He should survive. He should be able to see past the movie. Unlike Kobayashi, bear in mind that movie was not a Honda film. That was directed by Moriyoshi Oda. So the themes and the approach is slightly different, a little less probably antagonizing towards wartime death and stuff like that, perhaps.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
But he never got one. Now, I don't know if Tachibana installed the seat or if it's always been there, but narratively, it would have been so much better if Koichi is the one to ask for an ejection seat. In this scenario, Koichi is brave but not willing to throw his life away. Tachibana refuses, still calling him a coward. Koichi replies, I have a daughter now. Tachibana says, the mechanics were my family and they all died because of you.
Okay.
Then Tachibana sees Koichi with Akiko and realizes she's an orphan he adopted. That's
So
when
does he
it
want
clicks
this to be
for him.
Koichi's movie or
Life has
Tachibana's?
value beyond duty. He changes, helps Koichi, both characters complete their character arcs.
Did you say something,
But because
Omni?
there's no
Yeah, pause it
sorry.
here. We may as well get to this now. What he's describing, that character arc, already exists in the movie, but it's not Tachibana's. It's Sumiko's. The old woman. That is her arc that he just described. When Koichi comes home from the war, he gets to the mainland. She's the one who greets him by placing all of her rage and pain and every negative emotion onto him because she lost her children in the bombings. She lost everything. And she's looking at him and going, your job as a soldier was to protect the mainland and win the war. Not only did you fail at all that, you have the gall to come back here alive and just adding to everything. But then, of course, Noriko and Akiko enter the picture. At first, Sumiko's attitude is that bringing them in doesn't make you a hero. You're still trash. You still fail to do what you're supposed to do. But then she asks the one question that got to give props to the performance of Sakura Ando, because you can see there's this look on her face where she's almost thinking, if I ask this question, I might not be able to hate him anymore, where she asks, can Noriko breastfeed Akiko? And when the answer is no, that's when her maternal instincts take over. She used to be a mother. Unfortunately, her children perished in the bombings. And even though she's determined to hate Koichi, she can't just stand by and let a child die. So she has to push forward. And she tries initially to write it off like, oh, this is such a bother for me all the same that I'm helping you guys. But by the end of the movie, she's part of this found family. Extended Cinema never brings her up, which is weird. Especially
and he shows footage of her.
Only at the beginning.
Only at the beginning, but I don't think he ever mentions her by name.
Yeah, never. And again, what he's describing here, the arc he wants for Tachibana, that is Sumiko's arc. It's in the movie. So we don't need a repeat of that. And the other thing that struck me is that, we can say that the reason Sumiko has that change is something that's baked into her character. She is a mother who lost her children. As a mother, she's going to have certain instincts, right? Accented Cinema here is saying something about how there's no reason for Tachibana to have this change of heart, but there's something baked into his character as well. Do you want to take a wild guess what it is? I'll just tell you.
Yeah.
Tachibana is an aircraft mechanic.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I'm saying this as someone whose father was in aviation and was an aircraft mechanic, Air Force, various maintenance facilities. Now he's the director of maintenance at Life Flight of Maine, which is a statewide medevac company that specializes in aircraft that lift patients to hospitals. So you ask him, you ask any aircraft mechanic what the job of an aircraft mechanic is. Their job is to make sure that the pilot and passengers on the aircraft survive. Their job is to make sure that aircraft, helicopter, airplane, whatever, is in 100% pristine, perfect working functional condition so that it can take off, fly, and land without anyone being injured. As an aircraft mechanic, he's going to have those same instincts, Tachibana. And again, we combine that with the earlier scene and what actually goes on in there about the attitude of all those mechanics. His instinct, deep down, is going to be, I got to make sure this plane works. And even though he hates Koichi at first, even though he's brought in angered, and Koichi specifically reached out to him because he figures Tachibana is the only person in the entire world who hates me more than I hate myself. So if I'm going to ask anyone to assist me in my own death, he's going to be the one to do it. But again, kind of mirroring what happened with Sumiko, what you can see about this movie is people's better nature winning out over their negativity in the long run. And again, we see that here. It's not stated that he must fix the plane because he's an aircraft mechanic, but maybe it doesn't need to be, just like it didn't need to be stated that Sumiko is a mother, so that's why she got involved. That's never outright stated either, but we know that's why it is.
Mm-hmm. I think the closest we get to that is his friends ask him, it's like, why does it have to be this guy? And he just says, trust me on it. Now, he has personal reasons for it, but the official reason he's giving is that I know this guy is good at his job, and this is a unique plane. There's only two of these. So we need someone who really knows what he's doing to work on this. Can't just be anybody.
Mm-hmm. So, but again, the main reason he called Tachibana is because he knows Tachibana hates his guts for the same reason that Koichi hates his own guts.
Mm-hmm.
But again, Tachibana, he's probably been an aircraft mechanic for a while. They wouldn't just put him in the army and assign him to be a mechanic if he didn't know what he was doing, right? I mean, maybe I'm assuming a lot there, but his role as a mechanic would ultimately, I think, win over his hatred for Koichi. Plus, there's also the fact that, generally speaking, your average person isn't murderous.
Yeah.
I mean, when
you also take into consideration that, like I said, Accident Cinema's argument hinges on that moment early in the movie where he says, go use the machine gun, assuming that this is a suicide round.
Yes.
Now, if that was the case, the latter half of this movie would play out differently. It honestly would. And we don't get that. That's why I don't buy this idea that Tachibana believed in all of this, because we don't have any evidence that was the case.
Mm-hmm.
And that he thought that I'm sending him to die.
Right.
Everything in that scene, every time I have watched it, tells me, like Elijah was pointing out earlier, he's doing everything he can to survive. None of these guys know how to use those guns. You know how to use those guns. Go use the guns, because 20 millimeter guns kill anything. That is flat out text. 20 millimeter guns kill anything. And there's even a callback to that later on in the movie when he's the minesweeper. And they say a 15 millimeter gun can, kill anything, basically.
And he's the better shot.
And he's the better shot. That's the other reason. They also wanted, it was like, I realized Godzilla's a huge target, but they're also like, you're a better shot than all of us. And we saw what happened to the engineers. They panicked, fired off their machine guns, and that's why Godzilla targeted them and killed them.
We do see later on Shikishima is the designated gunman for the boat. So it does follow through with the idea of him being the best marksman for the job.
Oh, yeah. For sure. For sure. And keep in mind, this whole operation, it's motivated in part because Koichi does say, I'm going to kamikaze this thing, but it's also an act of desperation.
Mm-hmm.
And he's doing it secretly. Doesn't necessarily want anybody else to know. Because that's the whole cover. He doesn't tell anybody, I'm doing this so I can die and hopefully save everybody. I'm just doing this because you need to lure Godzilla out to where you need to lure him.
Yeah. And
there might even be a part of him that thinks maybe this will actually work. And I won't have to do this.
Yeah. Tachibana clearly thinks that the plan of blowing Godzilla up from the inside will work. But then he gets the idea of, but I can't really, even though I have the opportunity, he could have gone through with the plan and gotten away with murder, basically. Because, he could just say, well, how was I to know he was going to fly into Godzilla's mouth? He never told me, and nobody would be able to disprove it. But at that crucial moment, he can't bring himself to do it. Because, again, his better nature as a human being and as an aircraft mechanic, that's what wins out in the end. So he does install the injection seat, and it's not like he springs that on Koichi either. Other movies, it would have been a surprise. He would have pulled the lever, and Koichi would have flown out of the plane. He was like, no, what's going on? This isn't how it was supposed to go. And that would have ultimately, I think, robbed the movie of something, because, well, it's kind of like that one line from the beginning of the Incredibles during the court trials. You didn't save my life, you ruined my death. Yeah. Koichi is convinced that this is his path to redemption. He asked the one person who would be willing to help him die to do that, and yet even that guy has forgiven him by the end, and he knows that going in. We don't find out until the end that they had that exchange. But we do see that that's exactly what happened. And that is important. It can't be that Koichi has to ask for this for himself, because he hasn't forgiven himself. To have... I guess it would be kind of ridiculous to say that Tachibana is his greatest enemy, but to have the one person who truly loathes him in this world forgive him and say that he wants to see this man live, that is what gets Koichi moving forward again. Yeah, even if we hadn't seen Marco survive.
Yeah, I do think what Accent Cinema brings up, where he is seeing what Koichi is doing now, he sees that, I took in this woman and this child, and I guess I'm a dad now. And that's, I do think that factors into this. I don't think it was purely, it wasn't something that Tachibana had done in those intervening years, because obviously he still went out of his way to track this guy down and punch him in the face a few times because he insulted his honor. But like I said, it's through observation that his mind, I do think, changes.
Yeah.
And which I think just continues to build on not only the theme of the movie, but also on what I get the impression, because it was one of the other engineers, but I have a feeling that if he's feeling that way, probably all of them are feeling that way, because Japan was feeling that way at this point in the war.
The novelization,
they were exhausted.
The novelization makes it very clear that it's the entire island.
Yeah, they were exhausted by that point. They were tired of it. They knew that they were in a losing war. They knew that kamikaze pilots didn't accomplish a thing.
Mm-hmm.
So none of it holds up. It's at this point where I started to feel like when I was watching this video, it's like I feel like he saw a different movie. When we get to his conclusion, that is where I feel like he tips his hand and reveals why he is presenting the movie the way he is, whether it's intentional misrepresentation. I'm not entirely sure. I can't say for sure. And as much as it might come across as an ad hominem attack on him, which I certainly do not want to do, I think if we go back to discussions of rhetoric, I'm sure most of us probably remember these from school, the ethos, pathos, and logos. We have to address the ethos of his argument because I think he has a very particular bias that he reveals in the conclusion that colors everything that he's talking about with this movie.
I don't. So this is where I probably will disagree the most.
Well, let's get to that point.
Okay.
Such scene, the narrative becomes that of Koichi earning Tachibana's approval by expressing a willingness to die. What kind of up lesson is that?
Well, it's not
the movie
lesson,
spends 2 hours criticizing the military's disregard for life, only to imply death is a path to redemption.
I don't think that's what the movie was saying at all.
Does learn the lesson. That's why he tells Koichi to live. But this whole transformation happens off screen. One of the moral of the story happens off screen.
It doesn't.
You were this close to perfection. What in Godzilla's name was that?
What in Godzilla's name was that? He thought he was clever.
Of course, this doesn't affect my enjoyment of the film.
Oh, does it?
Like I said, it was just a nitpick.
A nitpick that you spent this entire video a good portion of this video addressing and basically saying that this movie contradicts itself, but it doesn't wreck the movie for you. Okay.
It's about 5 minutes of it. I would say just how, like, you brought up Shima showing up in Ginza for like little reason. I think you can find a small, nothing is ever perfect. We all agree on that.
Yeah.
I think we can find small elements of this. And in fact, as he goes on here, he's going to say that the film was, I think he just said it. The film was almost perfection besides the Tachibana aspect, which I think we can kind of all agree that primarily is a misunderstanding from the beginning of the film from him that then kind of snowballs into a bigger like misunderstanding by the end of the film. Yeah. He praises Godzilla, he praises the visual effects, he praises all the other characters, and what we're about to see is him kind of just give his overall thoughts, and I think we should definitely continue on, but I don't think it's a big thing.
Strengthen an unintentional message. -1 merely has a small inconsistency that undermines a strong theme. Before we wrap this up, let's also address the film's political message. Whether you see Godzilla as a symbol of post-war guilt or a classic symbol of American nuclear power, the film's tone is the same. Japan is shown acting in self-defense. It makes no mention of the Japanese aggression in Asia, nor the reason it was at war with the US.
Does it have
International reactions range from disappointment to condemnation. It's all par for the course for director Takashi Yamazaki, whose previous anti-war films were either half-baked or controversial. I suppose that's a topic for another time. I, too, would prefer a stronger anti-war stance. But given Japan's current political climate, -1 is, sadly, about as much as I expect. Like many Japanese anti-war films, -1 makes amends to Japanese countrymen, and that is okay. But now that Godzilla is defeated and the trauma confronted, I hope Japan can find the courage to finally face its imperialist past. After all, we all have our kaiju, And for many people, Japan is our Godzilla.
Japan is our Godzilla.
So, before you dive into this, I want to break this conversation up into two parts, because first I'm going to say where I disagree with you, and then I want to talk about the two topics you want to talk about. Nowhere in this does he really criticize the film more than he has. He has echoed the responses from across the globe, which is, if you look in South Korea, which especially South Korea was taking the brunt of the Imperial Army during that time. He's acknowledging the controversies with both Yamazaki as a director and the film itself. Now, there's two aspects to that I think we really need to discuss, and that is the lack thereof representation of Japan's atrocities and the anti-war. Since you are the host of this, Nathan, you can pick whichever one, and we can do it however you want. But those, I think, are the two things to really look at in this afterward.
Yeah. What were the two options again? I was a little distracted by the chat.
It is either acknowledging the lack of acknowledging the atrocities Japan committed in World War II, or it is the anti-war, lack of an anti-war stance that Yamazaki has.
Right. For me, the whole idea that this movie has to acknowledge wartime atrocities, first off, that's not necessarily part of the focus of this movie. And I would argue it does, by speaking to the issue of kamikaze pilots, because you can take that as a wartime atrocity. Now, it's an atrocity Japan committed against its own people, but it's an atrocity nonetheless, I would say. Now, it's a relatively small one, but they use that to comment in a broader sense about how Japan, Imperial Japan, had such a flagrant disregard for life. What do they really want them to constantly name everything that that Japan did during the war that was horrible? They acknowledge that Japan did horrible things in the war. They just don't name all of them. It's like, does every, we'll say, American World War II movie have to talk about every facet of the war? No, it doesn't. It needs to talk about what's relevant to the story it's telling.
Yeah,
this is a movie. This is not a documentary.
To me, this is, if I may, I'm with you on this. I feel like this is kind of the reason this is standing out is because, again, in context of the movie, it's a non sequitur. It's kind of like, did you hear about the Turning Red 9/11 controversy?
No.
The most summarized version I can give is that there's an animation critic on YouTube called The Mysterious Mr. Enter. He's kind of controversial, not because of anything he's done per se, although he's got a little bit of that, but more because when he has a bad take, he has a really bad take. When he reviewed Pixar's Turning Red, now people have found a lot to critique about that movie. It's not one of Pixar's most beloved entries, but what part of the video that he spent a surprising amount of time on was critiquing the movie because it's set in 2001, but it says nothing about the September 11th attacks. And okay, it doesn't. But the thing is, what does that have to do with the story? The story of Turning Red is not about the terror attacks. It's not even set in America. It's set in Canada. It's about generational friction between specifically a mother and a daughter. So if there was a way to tie 9/11 into that, that'd be one thing, but it doesn't really need to be there. So a lot of people called him out on it to such a degree he eventually had to retract it.
Yeah,
and I think it's kind
I
of.
I would add on top of that happened in September. There's 8 full months that this movie could be set in. where that would not be an issue. But anyway, you were saying.
Yeah, but so I feel like that's again, him bringing that up out of nowhere was something he got called out for, because it didn't really have anything to do with the movie. Critiquing it for not addressing something that it really didn't have any business addressing is a kind of a weird critique. And I also kind of feel like maybe there's a little bit of that going on here as well, because like you said, is there any reason for it to specifically name all of the different atrocities? It does name some. Specifically, it names atrocities that Japan committed somewhat strangely against itself. And just admitting that, I mean, if you want to apply the term self-destruction to this movie in any capacity, that would be the place to do it. If you wanted to discuss how Japan addresses its view of the wars in a video about GMK or Godzilla versus King Ghidorah, go hog wild with that, because those movies do tie directly into those ideas. Here, the story is about a soldier who comes home in defeat, who is suffering from all these different traumas, one of which didn't even have a proper name at the time. Back then, it was just called shell shock, not PTSD, and you were just kind of expected to get over it or else be committed. So, again, does it really have to be here? Like you keep asking.
Yeah. Well, and here's the thing. Now, he specifically cites South Korea. Mm-hmm. Now, something that he doesn't reveal here, and this is where I think the bias comes in and why I think the ethos of his arguments start to crumble. He has admitted in other videos that he is Chinese. He's a Chinese man who lives in Canada, and not like that he's a student who's going to school there or something like in Canada or whatever. And when you look at the bulk of his work on YouTube, it seems pretty obvious. Yeah, he's probably Chinese. Well, the Chinese also have a long-standing grudge against the Japanese because of the war. And like you mentioned, Elijah, the Koreans were on the brunt of the army as well. So I could see, culturally speaking, watching a movie that not only is set during the war, is coming from a Japanese perspective, and our protagonist is a pilot, a Japanese pilot, and he's being presented in a sympathetic light. I can see why there would be a level of difficulty there to accept that. But at the same time, that is what the audience is bringing to the movie. It is not what the movie itself is actually doing or saying. And I think that's where the disconnect is. And I can understand people who are just like, I can't abide this. It reminds me too much of whatever it might be, whether it's something that was personally experienced or it's a cultural memory. I understand that, but that's a separate issue than what the movie itself is actually saying. It feels a little bit to me, and I don't want to read too much into it and make this too big of an accusation like this, but it feels a little bit like postmodern literary criticism that says, it's the death of the author. It's all that matters is what I, as the audience, I, as the interpreter, I, as the critic, bring to this. And I can make this mean what I want it to mean. Now, I don't know if that's necessarily the case for these cultural reactions, but I wonder if this cultural bias that accented cinema by being Chinese, if that isn't influencing him. Now, he's never flat out said anything anti-Japanese, so that may not be the case, but that bias can still exist, even if unconsciously.
So as an example, I talked about his Pulse video earlier. He talked very highly of it. So I don't believe there's a bias or like a bigotry towards Japanese entertainment or the Japanese accent cinemas. The person who's behind accent cinema has. I think what it comes down to is Yamazaki I think it comes down to this. Yamazaki has a tie to a very controversial author who does deny the atrocities that Japan conducted in World War II. That author wrote the book for The Eternal Zero, and he wrote the book for Fueled a Man They Call Pirate. Both were adapted into films by Yamazaki. Yamazaki obviously has worked with him. And so what I see the commonality is people are concerned that Yamazaki shares a similar opinion. Now, that is based purely on speculation. It is not established as fact. It is all speculatory if Yamazaki does. He tends to keep his political opinions to himself. And like, in all that, the author's connected to Shinzo Abe, which is a very controversial figure in Japanese politics. Oh boy. So I think what Accent Cinema is attempting here is he is echoing those concerns. And the reason I see that is he specifically highlights the Eternal Zero. Now, I myself have not seen the film, and I wish that my co-host Jackson could speak on this more for himself, because he has watched it. But the film tackles a kamikaze pilot. It is told in retrospective. It is the son of a kamikaze pilot telling his kids about their grandfather, who was a pilot. And it tackles the idea of him being drafted, being forced, and the hero he was because he fought against the social norm of being okay with kamikaze pilots. And that's, to my understanding, that's what Eternal Zero tackles, which is similar to this film. But for that film, and then Archimedes and Fueled as well, there has been, this directly connects to the other topic, so we might be ready to transition into that.
Just for clarification, you're speaking about the full title is escaping me, with Archimedes.
The Great War of Archimedes.
The Great Roar of Archimedes, which, for those who don't know, I've seen that one. That was the movie that Yamazaki made right before. It is about the construction of the Yamato, which was the massive flagship that Japan built before the war.
Which, by the way, that the similar themes that film tackles is actually tackled in Reigo, King of the Sea Monsters.
Yes, because that movie was actually about the crew of the Yamato encountering a kaiju during the war. I gotta give Hayashia credit. He did something I think precious few filmmakers in Japan are willing to do, and that's make a World War II era kaiju movie.
Well, so let's go ahead. I'm gonna start this off because for the writing I did, I found a quote from director Yamazaki. And this is what he had to say about all the criticisms in a kind of condensed way. Quoting now, "My generation may be the last generation whose parents knew about the war and were able to listen to firsthand information. I think it's better to have it as one of the themes you draw upon. At the time of the Eternal Zero, some people criticized it as glorifying war or being belligerent. But I don't understand why people took it that way. I think Archimedes, as well as Eternal Zero, are solid anti-war movies. I think it's best to make an anti-war movie that only focuses on the horrors of war. But if you do that, it won't reach the hearts of the general public. In order to deliver it, it has to be entertainment. I wish I could convey my anti-war message like a blow to the body." End quote. Now, what he says there about it being a horror of war is, and he says, like, that's how you have to translate that exact thing to general audiences. Look at what Godzilla represents: the horrors of war. Godzilla is the war to Shikishima. And the whole goal of the movie is to destroy Godzilla and to unite Japan and to care for the lives of the people that live in it. A very clear, deliberate establishment of anti-war based off of Yamazaki's own opinions.
And you can even, if I may, you can even sort of tie that in. I'm one of the few people who pointed out that during Godzilla's Ginza attack, when he destroys the capital, that there's constant comments about how the government is acting no different than it did during the war. He destroys the capital, the seat of power, which is surrounded by tanks. Any other Godzilla movie, those tanks would have been rolling up to meet Godzilla wherever he was. Instead, they're protecting the politicians, assuming they didn't evacuate in advance because they already knew Godzilla was coming. So Godzilla destroying that is kind of a symbolic act in that way as well. Not just with the whole looking up at the mushroom cloud thing, but the fact that he destroys the seat of power, which was still a holdover, technically speaking, in attitude from the war. Mm-hmm. So I just wanted to add that, please.
That's actually a great point. I've never actually thought about that. That's actually really, really genius.
That was my first thought upon my first viewing. So
that's really good. Another thing is they establish like the lack of America in the movie, and a lot of that too, I think, becomes Yamazaki wasn't trying to. Whether we want to admit it or not, Godzilla -1 and Takashi Yamazaki is not trying to be a controversial, world-shattering piece of cinema that questions and throws the entire system upside down. Yamazaki is a blockbuster movie director. He's been likened to Steven Spielberg of Japan. He is not trying to apologize or atone or do anything of the matter for the world politics of Japan. He's trying to make entertainment, but he's trying to make quality entertainment, which is where I think -1 stands out beyond those of its fellow films that were nominated for like the Visual Effects Award. -1 is trying to be a quality film that provides entertainment, whereas a lot of the other nominations, I'm not trying to be that Scorsese guy that says Marvel movies aren't art. I'm not saying that, but I'm saying a Marvel movie is made by a committee that tell them what to do with people who are under a contract to do that certain thing, and they get it out within 12 months from its conception to its completion. 12 months, which -1 took 4 years from its conception to completion. So that's just kind of an example of how -1. That's why it won. It was a film that took its time to create something of quality and not quantity.
Yeah. But
I gotta say, while you're thinking about it, when you were reading Yamazaki's quote about how something anti-war must be entertainment first, I instantly thought of MASH.
Yeah.
MASH was entertainment first. It had a lot to say over the years. I mean, the movie had a lot to say as well, but most people think of the show. And the show, it was a comedy first, but as it grew, as it went through its different seasons, it knew it had more to say, but it never lost sight of how to say it. So, I mean, comparing MASH to -1 might seem a little weird, but
yeah. Well, and the thing what makes MASH work is that it doesn't take a genius to figure out that both the movie and certainly the TV show are anti-war. Those things were made at the very tail end initially of the Vietnam War. It's about Korea, but you could argue it's really about Vietnam.
It's set in Korea. It's about Vietnam.
Yeah, it's set in Korea. But so its stance is clear, But like you said, the reason why people love it is because of the humor and the characters, because they are in the midst of all of that.
Mm-hmm.
It's what separates a story, what separates art from a documentary, where a documentary can come in and it can present you the facts. It can show you the dead bodies and everything else, the horrors of actual war. It can quote you statistics about how many people died. And the thing is that doesn't affect people nearly as much as they might want to think they do, because eventually you start throwing numbers like that at them. They can't grasp those numbers. But you make them a story that zeroes in on one of those numbers. People are going to get invested. And people are going to think about what this character is what this character is going through. In the case of -1, what does it mean? What does it mean to wrestle with PTSD? What does it mean to recover from the horrors of war? What does it mean to go back home? And this is something, I mean, I'm too young to know this, but what does it mean to go fight in a war and then come back and you aren't given a hero's welcome, you are reviled. That's what Vietnam vets had to deal with, and that's what Koichi is dealing with here. I went to go serve my country, but then I come home, you're a coward. You should have died. There's all of these things that are going in. It's a very human experience. And I think for some people, it's difficult to grasp that because they have certain views of the people and events that were involved in this. It would almost be like, I don't know if this is the right analogy to make. But it would almost be like an American filmmaker making a World War II movie with a sympathetic Nazi.
I believe that was called Valkyrie.
What?
He said Jojo Rabbit. I said Valkyrie.
Yeah, that's true. But with I haven't seen Jojo Rabbit, but with Valkyrie, that was someone who was turning against the system because he knew Hitler was he was not good for the country.
I guess Taika Waititi's not American, but it was produced partially in America with American actors.
Or maybe a better way to put it would be if you had a foreign movie that addressed World War II and presented, I guess, actually, let's make this incredibly relevant to the Godzilla fandom. It's why the World War II sequence in Godzilla vs. King Ghidorah is controversial.
Yeah.
Because it's Godzilla fighting and killing Americans.
I think when you are trying to tackle war specifically, if you are an American film and you're tackling war, the idea of World War II, I actually was just talking about this with somebody yesterday. The events of World War II is what led to the 38th parallel in the splitting of Korea between the Soviet Union and the United States, which led to the Korean War, which led to North Korea and South Korea, which has led to one of the most hostile countries in the world. Mm-hmm. There is no right way about it, right? There's not a right person, a wrong person. You can make an argument for both sides. You can make an argument for Japan. Right now, one of the most controversial things about Japan is it's a puppet for the United States. That goes back to the San Francisco Treaty, the occupation of Japan. But then it's, okay, was Japan better off without America or with America? And the issue with war is it is such a lose-lose that even remotely attempting to paint a narrative positively, which is what audiences want to see, they want to see a happy ending, it's impossible with war. So you have to decide which side of the line in the sand you're going to die on. Are you going to be as accurate as humanly possible and alienate 99% of the audience? Or are you going to go with what's easier to digest and just follow through with what is best for the audience. And you will find that most filmmakers, even Spielberg, even like Cameron, any of these people will usually side with that to prevent a huge shift, or just honestly, it's to prevent the executive producers from saying no. If we're being perfectly honest here,
basically. But I do think that extends to it really just kind of war movies in general. You know, in order to make them entertaining, there are certain things that you have to overlook. You know, I'm thinking of a lot of even classic American war movies that are extremely entertaining, often, and in some cases, kind of present their characters as these larger than life figures in a lot of ways. I'm thinking of specifically like The Great Escape. The Great Escape is about as far from tackling the horrors of war as you can get, you know, other than the fact that it's about POWs trying to escape. And it was inspired by an actual true story about a bunch of Allied soldiers who were POWs, and they tried to, you know, escape their prison and get out of Germany. Some of them succeeded, some of them were recaptured. And that's how, you know, so I guess the movie has a little bit of that, but it's for the sake of making stakes in this. By the way, if anyone listening to this or watching this hasn't seen The Great Escape, I highly recommend it. It's a fantastic movie. But, you know, we have precious few films that tackle war in as unblinking a fashion as possible. And even when you can point to some examples that do, it's still endeavoring to tell a story. Saving Private Ryan is noteworthy for its unflinching portrayal of D-Day. Absolutely relentless portrayal of D-Day. You get past that first bit, yeah, it's still intense after that, but it's not about D-Day. It's about, hey, we're a group of characters, we survived D-Day, and now they want us to go rescue some dude. And, you know, all the complications that comes with that, you know. Oh, if I go rescue Private Ryan and it gets me back home to my wife and kids sooner, I'm going to go do it. You know, that sort of a thing. And then you have the sniper. It's just like, I just want to kill more Germans. You know, he's losing his mind, you know. So, yeah, even that. Like you said, Elijah, you know, Spielberg is entertainment first, even when he's doing something. Or even Schindler's List. Schindler's List is an incredibly impactful movie. But what is the point of it? It's following the story of Mr. Schindler, who decided, I can't save all of them, but I can save some of them. But in order to understand what these people are being saved from, you have to show what they are suffering.
But even then, how can you show it to the full extent? There is a certain point where I think if somebody were to try making a movie that showed the full extent of the Holocaust, it would be unwatchable, not necessarily because of being badly made, but because it was almost incomprehensible, the sort of stuff that happens. I mean, you watch the documentaries, you see the real pictures. It's disturbing to what they found. And to try recreating that in a movie, I mean, you'd be lucky if you got an NC-17 rating. And that would be the lowest option. They might say, we can't even rate this. We can't show this. So
it's basically one step below a snuff film. All of that to say, to expect one story to tackle the entirety of something, to tackle the entirety of a war or a moment in history or an entire issue, you can't really do that. I'm also thinking, because this was a movie that I saw a lot of people compare -1 to. I don't know if you've seen it, Elijah, but I'm pretty sure you've seen it, Omni, and that is Grave of the Fireflies.
I know, I haven't seen it.
You haven't seen that? I highly recommend it. Elijah. It just finally got re-released by G-Kid. It's been out of print for a long time.
Famously described by one of the Channel Awesome crew or former Channel Awesome crew as the best movie he never wants to see again.
Yeah, and it was controversial for a lot of similar reasons, both in Japan and elsewhere, because it is zeroing in on two Japanese children who are trying to survive the war, and the oldest is often making questionable decisions about how to go about that, which is as being part of that. But some people, spoiler warning, even though the movie itself gives this away in the first 2 minutes, they don't survive. And some people are wondering if the movie is trying to say that the fact that they died is a representation of of what the Japanese people were doing for the country. They died for the country, which is itself becomes controversial, or if that's even the intended meaning. So, but again, how do you comment on the entirety of this? I don't think you can. This movie, the story, because it's based on a book. It's focused on showing these two children trying to survive in one of the most horrific events in history. And it's, weirdly enough, it might be rated G, or at least it initially was, but it doesn't shy away from showing certain things. We see fire bombings, and we don't see a bunch of people dying, but we see fire bombings, and we see how that affects people. And there's a lot of just emotionally intense and emotionally weighty things that are happening in this. Not violent human cruelty, but human cruelty nonetheless. We have an adult who says, we really should get rid of these kids because we can't afford to feed them. And the oldest brother hears that and just decides, fine, then we're just going to leave. And he just takes his younger sister and they leave. And that is one of the points in the movie where people debate is the movie saying that this was a good decision or not? It's hard to say.
Yeah.
All that to say, at the end of the day, I believe the criticism of it not showcasing that is up to it's a personal take. I think I think it's asking more than it should, but I do understand why people criticize that. And I think the only thing truly wrong in this video that we've watched and talked about for the last 2 hours is the fact that I think the nitpick, which he still very much establishes is a nitpick at the very end of his video, is misinterpreted and ignores very clear evidence.
Yeah.
And I just want to establish, I don't think Accent Cinema is a poor video essayist. I don't think he's a poor critical thinker. He is not pretending to be a fan of anything or pretending to know what he's saying. He's truly trying to articulate his own opinions and viewpoints, which is a great thing. And honestly, I would venture to say he wants room for conversation and discussion,
for sure.
Which is what we've been doing. So at the end of the day, what he did, we're doing exactly what he wanted, and that's having a discourse, a conversation about it, and discussing that criticism and bigger issues that he doesn't really touch upon that much, but is still a valid point of discussion as it's made by his video and us talking and the plethora of other videos and articles that have tackled those same issues with -1 and or Takashi Yamazaki's filmography.
Yeah. I'm going to be honest with you. The initial inspiration for this was because Omni said, I'm going to make a video in response. So you know what? I went in on that. But it's not so much me getting uppity because I'm a fan.
You're an angry G fan. That's what you're.
Yeah,
saying.
I'm an angry G fan. But it's my biggest gripe is that I feel like when someone makes an argument or makes a criticism, and the only way the argument works is if they ignore actual text and evidence within the thing itself, it bothers me, because I am all about the truth above all else. And I was like, fine, if you want to have a different take on this than I do, at least present accurate information and evidence. And that's where I took umbrage with this. If he didn't want to like -1 and he wanted to interpret it this way, he can go ahead and interpret it that way. But the only way the argument works is if he ignores what actually happens at the beginning. That's what really prompted this for me. I will admit, the first time I watched the video, I reacted a little bit emotionally. I talked to my brother. I might have been pausing it on my PS5 and yelling at my TV. But yeah, I have no ill will toward him. I'm like I've been saying, it's like I have no idea of whether or not these potential biases may have influenced what he had to say. But in the end, like I said, I just want the truth to be out there, and not misrepresented.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, yeah, I'm trying to think if there's anything else that we really need to bring up for this. But yeah, we spent 2+ hours talking about a 14-minute video.
There were people in the chat on my version of this. They were asking the question about that final line. For many people in Asia, Japan is our Godzilla. They were asking, so what the heck does that mean? And I was wondering about that too, because the way he phrased it, Japan is our Godzilla, not Japan was the Godzilla of previous generations. I don't know. Do you think that's reading too deep into it?
I think what he's trying to get at is that if Godzilla in this movie is the specter of war and the embodiment of at least Koichi's PTSD, for a lot of people, that's how they feel about Japan. And as I have been learning in the last 10 years of researching this and taking my fandom of Godzilla and such things more seriously, Japan's neighbors have a very long cultural memory. And I think especially with the current political climate in Japan, there is, and I think it's an unfounded fear, but I'm also speaking as an outsider here. There is this fear that imperialism is going to return to Japan. And I'm going to be honest with you, even if enough imperialists got power in Japan, Japan does not have the resources in order to make World War II happen again.
I'm going to be very cautious, so bear with me. From my outsider understanding, reading Japanese reactions and responses, the concern of the current cabinet in Japan and the current political establishment is Japan is the work dogs or the lapdog of a administration, that being the United States, which is a very controversial administration in the world of global economics and global politics. And that administration being what's basically controlling, based off of these reactions, controlling the current cabinet of the Japanese political system is very polarizing, especially for neighbors of Japan, such as China, Taiwan, especially Taiwan, North Korea, South Korea, the Philippines, Russia. These are all countries that are closer to Japan than the United States, that have difficulties with the idea of the Japanese cabinet being the lapdogs of the United States current administration.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that might be what he's referencing.
Yeah. So it's probably a combination of those two, the current political climate and the long cultural memory. Now, I saw a couple of comments to this effect. I don't want to address this, but even though I think we spelled that right at the beginning of the stream, so we have another Dr. Skipper.
No.
Not close.
Cinema is infinitely better than Dr. Skipper.
Mm-hmm.
This is almost apples to oranges here.
Apples apples to antique desks, even.
Yeah, because Dr. Skipper was clearly making a bad faith argument.
One right after.
I would argue, he says he watched every Godzilla movie, from what I can remember of that video. But so it's not ignorance, but he's making, at least ignorance of the material, but he's making bad faith arguments.
And saying stuff that's flat out wrong, like Godzilla's public domain. Or
Yeah. Accident Cinema is making thought out arguments that are either misinterpreting pieces of the puzzle, which creates this massive domino effect, or he is missing certain pieces of the puzzle. So it's not the same at all.
Yeah. Anyone can misunderstand something.
Yeah. Now, if we had been making this video responding to Dr. Skipper, which honestly, I think most of us would have said, like, that's a waste of time anyway. The video itself debunks itself. But we would not be nearly as kind to Dr. Skipper.
I would just want to do a cinema sentence video on it.
On Dr. Skipper's video?
Yeah, you just call it good.
There you go, Elijah. You need to start a YouTube channel that's like Cinema Sins, but for video essays. It was like, this is wrong. The problem is that you're too busy to do anything like that, and I feel like the joke would run its course pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Was there anything else?
Let me see.
I think that's all the questions in the chats.
Yeah, for sure. Like, what is this? Another fine addition to my Dr. Skipper hit pieces? Who is this person? Okay. I was going to say, who is this guy? He's not one of my normal viewers. But I think we've heard basically everything. I'm sure I'll think of something somewhere and write or podcast or whatever about it at some point. Elijah, I am actually very grateful that you invited yourself onto this. I think it was a tremendous addition.
Oh yeah.
You know me, I love inviting myself to stuff.
You do, especially when it's about the movie whose sequel you single-handedly funded.
Probably. If it looks bad,
that's what I'm gonna do. That's what I'm gonna do, man. In I don't know, next year or the year after or whatever, whenever -0 comes out, I'm just gonna go around and tell everybody. It's like, you know what? You know who you have to thank for this? His name was Elijah Thomas, and you will show him respect. He saw the first movie 3,900 times.
I saw it 5 times within 48 hours of its U.S. release.
Yes.
So,
and he's angry that there's one guy who claims to have seen it more than him in a movie theater.
I think he said he saw it, 32 times or something?
Oh, I think it was like 40.
Or 40. 40? Yeah.
Yeah.
I wasn't about to spend that much money. I already spent a couple hundred on just seeing this movie. But to be fair, I then bought the 4K, the DVD, the Blu-ray, the -color Blu-ray, the Steelbook, and then the Japan home video version. So
did you get the watch? But did you get the watch-along edition?
Yeah, that's the -color Blu-ray.
And also,
I'm guessing the novelization, the physical copy of the soundtrack, or at least downloading?
I got the Waxworks LP. I have not got the novelization yet. I bought the Minus Color Super 7 Ultimates. I want to say that's... Oh, and I got a cup. I think that's
a cup.
And all I got was this stupid T-shirt.
But, you know what? I will do that for you, Elijah. For your next birthday, or maybe the birthday before -0 comes out, I'm going to make you a T-shirt that says, I saw Godzilla -1 32 times in a movie theater, and all I got was this lousy shirt.
To be fair, I only saw it 30 times in the theater. I've seen it a total of, I want to say 31, because then when the Blu-ray came out, I watched the dub, and I hated every episode.
You watched the dub and were disappointed.
I can't watch the movie without subs. It's wrong. It's wrong.
I think, I'm trying to remember how many times I've seen -1. I've seen it at least 10 times.
You saw it one time with me.
Yes. Which was probably not, which was much less than it should have been.
We were talking about seeing it more than once, but we ended up not doing it.
Yeah, that was an interesting weekend. I wish we had kind of podcasted just about that whole experience, but yeah. Yeah, in case you're wondering, Ryan, right when -1 came out, there was a group of us, Kaiju podcasters or Riot fans, whatever. We all met in Tennessee and stayed at a wonderful Airbnb out in the middle of nowhere, and went and saw -1 together. And 2 of us podcasted. Well, 3 of us podcasted about it, because I had Jack G-Man Hudgens was the one who actually put the whole thing together, and I had him on my show. And the same weekend in the same house, Elijah met with his co-host over the internet and recorded his episode.
Yeah. We did a lot of recording that weekend.
Yes, we did.
I remember there was we had recorded a total of 3 episodes. There was the Kaiju conversation one, the MIFV one, and then Jack and I recorded one that Nathan has somewhere that I'm still waiting on it getting.
No, I sent it to you guys on Google Drive.
Well, I don't know where it's at. Send it to me again.
Oh.
I need to. That's the lost episode of the Minus Weekend.
The Minus Weekend. I'm sure it's stashed away someplace. I don't remember if it's still on my Google Drive or not, but I can probably find it on my SD card, my many SD cards, and I'll send it to you. Has it? He probably has it.
Probably. Is it time for the most noblest of podcasting traditions?
You mean shameless self-promotion?
The most noblest.
Yes, I say we do that, since this is going out to 3 different YouTube channels. Could have been 4, but
we're gonna.
I'll send you the VOD, and you can upload it if you want.
I'll say let's start with Ryan, since you and I have been yapping for the last 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Okay, why not? Well, for those of you who are watching this on my channel, you probably know what to expect. For those of you who are just showing up, or who might be watching this on one of the other channels, I have my YouTube channel under the name Omni Viewer, of course. I'm the author of multiple different books, all set in the same universe, collectively known as Tales from the Omni Vault. There is an official website that recently went up for it, in fact, and you can find all those books on Amazon. I've got a bunch of different projects in the works, some of which will be here on this channel, some of which, if they ever materialize, will hopefully be much bigger. But for now, that's what I got, and I'm sticking with that story.
Nathan, do you want me to go next?
Yeah, go for it.
Well, hello, I'm Elijah, and I have a Kaiju and Tokusatsu problem, if you couldn't tell by...
Hi, Elijah.
Joking aside, I am the co-host of the podcast Kaiju Conversation with my good friend Rex. We cover the wide world of tokusatsu, from kaiju and giant monsters to henshin heroes and J-horror. You can find all of our episodes, all of our social media, and all of our blogs on the website www.kaijuconversation.com, along with 2 sub-projects I do, upcoming Kaiju films, upcoming Kaiju television, and the only complete Japanese Kaiju movie database on the internet, tackling over 80 years of Kaiju entertainment from 1934 all the way to 2025. And by I mean everything, I mean everything. I'm also a writer. I've written for GodzillaMovies.com, Kaiju Ramen Magazine, Kaiju United. My writing's been featured in the book Giant Bug Cinema, a Monster Kid's Guide from Bear Manor Media. But most recently, I got to write the foreword for the book G Cinema, an exploration and celebration of Japan's Monster King, from Daniel DeManna and Font Hill Media. So definitely that comes out in February. Take a look out. That book is the definitive Godzilla book. And by definitive, I quite literally mean it is the best one. Outside of writing and podcasting.
Oh, you just threw Mr. Cowlett under the bus there? My gosh.
Mm-hmm. I am also, as I established at the beginning, the bonus feature producer for SRS Cinema. I've worked on various titles: Yuzo, The Biggest Battle in Tokyo, Liverleaf, War of the Ninja Monsters, Jiron vs. Gora, Hoshi 35, Sharkdemic. I'm trying to think what else. I've worked on Outerman, Dene's Chaos, the Visual Bandits collection that is right now at the Duplicators, and the upcoming Crying Free Sex trilogy. Along
Dene's
with
Chaos, by the way, just shipped.
It is, everybody. Yes. And the upcoming Brush of the God Blu-ray. So that's just the tip of the iceberg. Next year is a new year. I doubled my work from last year to this year. I'm sure next year is going to follow suit. So stay tuned for SRS Cinema. You can get all of those Blu-rays on srscinema.com, and now on Amazon. Both the Blu-rays and DVDs are all available to order. So that's pretty cool. If you want to check out my stuff, my personal stuff, you can check out ET13_Productions or E. Thomas 1975 on X, the artist formerly known as Twitter. Thanks, Danny. And on Instagram as well. So that's what I got.
Yeah, there you go. This is why you have a T-shirt that says "Leave me alone. I'm working on my Blu-rays."
That is true.
All right, and just really quick, check out my author website, nathanjsmarchand.com, where you can keep up with all of the latest things that I have coming out that are not podcast related necessarily, including, as of this this live stream, come Monday, December 1st, I will be on my website and all of my author socials. So make sure you check the link trees that I'll have in the description of this video, at least on my version of it. You will get the cover reveal for my next book, which is The Worlds of Nathan Marchand, Volume 2, Tales of the Lost and Lonely, another collection of rare and unpublished short stories by yours truly. I can't wait for everybody to see this cover. The people that I have been showing it to have thought it was absolutely fantastic, and the book will hopefully, fingers crossed, be out before Christmas. And then obviously I am the host of such podcasts as the Monster Island Film Vault, the podcast seeking entertainment and enlightenment through tokusatsu, and Henshin Power V3. Yes, I know. Henshin Power V3. We're 3 friends of 3 minutes to talk about tokusatsu. If you are into film appreciation, particularly for kaiju and tokusatsu, listen to the Film Vault. It also has some fun shenanigans in the form of audio drama segments. In fact, Elijah has even participated in one of them, where he got into an argument with an alien to save the world from, I forget what was the evil monster from Reptilian.
Psychor.
Yeah, that's what Psychor. It was Psychor Mark II. So he saved the world by arguing. It's his superpower. Arguing over what is a kaiju to boot too.
And you can now check out what is a kaiju on www.kaijuconversation.com/upcoming or Japanese kaiju films.
Yeah, there you go. And if you enjoy Henshin Hero Television, give Henshin Power V3 a listen. But like Ultraman, even though we cover 5 to 10 episodes of television per podcast episode, we can only talk about each one for 3 minutes. I co-host that podcast with Christopher Reiner and Jake Hambrick. I'm also a member of the stable of actors for Scyther Podcasts. You can hear me as Rito. Well, just Rito, we'll say. He has a different last name in the podcast, in the audio drama. But you can hear me as Rito on Power Rangers, the audio drama. And of all people, Deadpool on X-Men, the audio drama, although I was only in one episode as a post-credit gag, but I have apparently become iconic to the listeners of that show as Deadpool. I don't know how to feel about that. And Johnny Storm, baby, on Avengers, the audio drama, whenever they have crossovers with the Fantastic Four. So I think that's basically all the really important. If you want to know any more, like I said, check the links in the show notes, as I'm fond of saying.
And we also want to emphasize that, again, Accented Cinemas is a good channel, and you should check Accented Cinema out as well if you haven't. Just because we zeroed in on this one video to point out a place where it went wrong, doesn't mean, like was mentioned in the comments, doesn't mean he's the new Dr. Skipper. He does have good insights, but to bring it back to what was brought up before, we can only zero in on one part. We can't focus on the whole.
For sure. All righty. And just really quick here. Kim wants post-stream shenanigans. I just name the place, Kim. Where do you want to do that? You want to jump in here? Or do you want to do it on like Facebook Messenger or something? Let us know and I can make it happen, because I have not hung out with the Queen of the Fabulous Empire in a long time, and I miss her.
I think the same goes for all of us.
Yeah, for sure. All righty. So I for a minute to see if she can let us know where to go do that. Otherwise, I'd be like, and stream is over. But no, I need to know where she wants to do this. Or maybe I'll just text her. You know what? I'll just text her. All right. Yeah. Thanks, everybody. And, check out all of our stuff. And you know what? Go watch some Accented Cinema. He's actually pretty good at what he does. Well, okay.
I got you. I already did that.
Yeah. All righty. See you later.
Adios.